You're now listening to the Rogue Ones podcast, conversations with extraordinary people doing fascinating things that will encourage us to live with a bend toward the remarkable. This guest, while seemingly a little rough around the edges, lives life with an immense amount of gratitude and appreciation for all he's been given, and has proceeded to give it all back to his community. Thanks for joining me today. Keep listening. Hey, I'm Leslie Eiler Thompson. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you'll remember Rogue number 9, Jim Wendler. He's an iconic powerlifter and someone who my husband introduced me to when we started dating in 2009. I say introduced, and by that I mean he told me about his work and how it had affected his life. We didn't know him personally, so welcoming him onto the Rogue Ones podcast was an honor. In that episode, Jim references someone named Dave Tate and the company EliteFTS. These were two other names I heard a lot about from my then boyfriend 10 years ago, and today I get to welcome the legendary Dave Tate on the Rogue Ones podcast. Dave Tate, former powerlifter and trainer, founded EliteFTS Systems 20 years ago as a way to continue to do the sport he loved while pouring into others and encouraging them to do the same. Elite is also a high-end gym equipment outfitter, which ultimately funds the unmeasurable amount of free content they give to those who have ears to listen. Dave gives away the same kind of knowledge he was gifted when he needed it most as a severely bullied teen. Labeled as learning disabled as a young child, Dave was an easy target for other kids, and oftentimes he would find himself being attacked on his walks home from school. Then he found the gym and athletics. His coaches and weight training mentors poured wisdom into him that eventually led to him graduating college, something that was never expected. He got stronger, not just physically, but mentally. He learned resolve, and he decided he wanted to devote his life to helping others do the same. Eventually, Dave would join the most iconic and epic powerlifting group in the world, Westside Barbell, headed up by Louis Simmons. Dave is an author, a business owner, former pro powerlifter, and an icon in the strength world. In light of all these accolades, Dave has said that his greatest accomplishment in life has been marrying his wife and adopting his 2 boys, the oldest of which is autistic, a label Dave had trouble accepting as it took him back to the days of isolated loneliness as a learning disabled child. His openness to talk about all areas of his life makes this conversation so special, and I'm grateful to have him on. We sat in the middle of the EliteFTS gym and talked for a recorded 3 hours and 23 minutes. This episode is edited, but for a video of the full version, you can go to rogueonespodcast.com and find a link to the video on their channel. When you watch, you'll see the 2 of us sitting at the legendary EliteFTS table, where they film their own podcast, Table Talk, while we sip Monster Energy drinks. In keeping with EliteFTS's 20-year tradition of freely answering questions from hobbyists or aspiring powerlifters, Dave takes to Instagram once a week for an AMA session, answering most all questions that come his way. They can be in lifting, life, or business. Some of them aren't worth answering, but some cut straight to the heart of why Dave does what he does. Here are some examples that are more about business. What are your 3 tips for daily success? Would you do anything differently if you could start your training career again? Then there are a ton of technical questions like this. Tipping forward coming out of the hole while squatting, please help. Or how to get the most out of floor press for raw bencher. And then there's stuff like this. You're on death row. You can have anything you want for your last meal. What is it? That last one had me so darn curious, so that's where we start our conversation. I think you'll be surprised by the answer. It doesn't actually have anything to do with food at all. I'm now delighted to introduce you to the one and only, Rogue number 19, Dave Tate. To start with. So the first one is, you're on death row. You can have anything you want for your last meal. What is it? Do you remember what you answered?
No, I don't. But
grilled cheese.
Yeah, I was going to say grilled cheese, but I I think that comes from, when I was a kid, my mom or my grandma would always, for lunch, they'd make grilled cheese. So it's more the memory type factor. That's what it would be. If I could have that, and then at least I would be able to think back, to things that I remember.
You answered that from a very thoughtful, this is my last meal. What would I want to remember?
Yeah, because you can eat anything, right? So let's eat something that's going to at least give me some type of memorable thought. There's other things I know that will go through my mind when I die, when the time comes. I know for a fact will go through my mind, but there's other things that I know won't, where the grilled cheese sandwich would stimulate some of those other things that I would like to think about before I'm gone.
Well, that's brilliant. I was expecting you to say I just love a good grilled cheese.
No.
The other one, they asked your favorite movie, and you said Coyote Ugly. And I just wanted to ask, why Coyote Ugly? Oh, okay, it was a joke. See, that was, I wondered.
It's when people ask me things like, what's your favorite movie, and I don't have one. There's a lot of movies that I like, for a certain period of time, then you go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
It's I could say, Rocky was awesome.
Yeah.
But if I watch it now, it's not those.
Right.
So I'm not like a movie buff.
Sure.
TV shows are more my attention span.
Well, good. I'm glad Coyote Ugly, because my question was going to be why. Let's start with, you've kind of built this empire, almost this company that works to educate and facilitate strength athletes. Where did this interest for powerlifting, where did this come from?
When I was 12, I was put into a powerlifting gym. So that's the short answer. It started with my uncle, I believe, buying me a weight set for Christmas, and it's just the plastic type of weights. So I'd spend 3 hours in the basement just doing every single exercise in the book every single day. And my dad saw that I had an interest in that. He owned his own small business and knew the chief for narcotics that was associated with Findlay Barbell Club, and asked him if it'd be okay if I went there and trained with those guys, because it was a private key club, which was a powerlifting club. And so they took me in. They really didn't help me that much at first. I just did my own stuff. After a few months, they pulled me aside and said, "Hey, look, there's a meet coming up in Canton, Ohio. You're going to do it." What the hell is a power? What is this? Well, you squat, bench, and deadlift. Okay, that's cool. I know how to do those. I turned 13, and then a couple months after that, I did my first powerlifting meet. And it was a different system than what they use today. Today they use a round system. Before it was more.
What do you mean round system?
Everybody does their first attempt, then everybody does their second attempt, then everybody does their third. Where before it was like a round robin. You started with the weight being the lightest, and then it went up to the heaviest. So because I was the weakest, I did my lift, and then I had 2 minutes, and then I had to do my second lift.
Oh, no.
And then 2 minutes, and I'd have to do my third lift. Then they would raise the bar 200 pounds. And then one of Louis Simmons's females came out and did her first lift. And I thought at the time, this is the sport for me. Because if I'm getting killed, absolutely killed, then there's a lot of room to grow.
Where did that attitude come from, though? Because I feel like a lot of people would have felt defeated.
Before that period of time, I was, and this is before, all the different labels that you have now, but I was labeled as learning disabled. So school was always really hard for me. And so I got picked on a lot. So things that I remember from elementary school is, everybody had their little desk. My desk had a little picture of a clock in the corner of it that would say 10 o'clock, or it was permanent. That's when I had to leave the room to go see the tutor. And I remember thinking, they can't possibly think that I'm so stupid that I don't know to look at the clock to be able to go see the tutor. So because of that, I wasn't in the classes with everybody else, most of the time. And then that led to being beat up, picked on. There was a point in time before, it was in the 6th grade, where I was walking home from school, and it was normal for somebody to, throw me on the ground, kick me, just spit on me or whatever it was going to be. It's kind of a normal process. And I was walking home, and it was going through like crossing through a street. One of the kids had a tetherball. Well, he took that and he kind of lassoed my legs, and got me down on the ground, and then just beat the shit out of me, and then turned me around, shoved my face into the ground. And I remember sitting there, and all these other kids were laughing and kind of cheering it on. And I couldn't do anything about it because I didn't have the self-esteem to do anything about it. And I'm being kicked, and being kicked by a few of the different kids. And just sat there thinking, how long am I going to take this? And all I remember is getting up on all fours and getting kicked, in the side, and it didn't hurt. And I realized, something's going on here. And I realized I was fucking mad. I was pissed. And then the moment I stood up, they all laughed and kind of went away. But my mind, it was like, this is the last time anything ever like this is going to happen again. And then short after that is when the weight set came into the equation. So I still had that stuff. But when I started training, I started getting bigger and I started getting stronger real fast. So, I go into the 7th grade, which is kind of a new start. And when I started wrestling, I realized here's a tool that I can use that if I'm ever in that position again, I can actually get out of it. So during that wrestling season, just with the weight training and the weight training that was going on with wrestling, started to build that confidence to a certain degree, just a little bit. So when the powerlifting came, it's like, okay, this is just like the wrestling. I'm starting at the bottom. There's no place lower to really go. I can only go up. At the end of that season, I was running the stairs and waiting for my mom to pick me up, and everybody's left, and my mom was late, and I just kept running it, and one of the coaches came by and said, what are you doing? Because it's the end of the season. Why are you running the stairs? The season's over. And I told him I don't ever want to get beat again. And he says, you keep working like this, you'll never get beat again. Coach Bill Mullen, he changed my life with one statement. And that one statement, is what set that whole thing up. Took that into powerlifting to where, I can get better. I have people around me that can teach me how to get better. And I was very fortunate and blessed to have people who knew what they were doing. I got big fast, real fast. So I very quickly became the person everybody was making fun of to the person nobody wanted to fuck with. And I already was very internalized and very, I don't want to say a misfit, but I didn't have a lot of friends. Isolated, yeah. And isolated on purpose. Somebody would try to befriend me, and I didn't want any part of it. And I'd spend more time sitting under a tree, by the golf course, just looking in the sky than I would spend doing most anything else.
What was funny to me is the story that you tell of going to that key gym with all the powerlifters. And it seemed to me like that was like the first time when your isolation, even if everyone felt isolated or alone, you were alone together, And so instead of being the one kid with the clock on your desk, instead of being the one kid that was beat up, whatever, now you were the person doing something about it with a bunch of other people. And now you had your thing. You kind of felt like you fit into a place.
They cared too, because part of the story that I left out there is, the chief for narcotics, I was getting in trouble. Before I turned 16, I already had like 7 points on my license. They're on my ass. And they're like, look, we're training every day, 5 days a week. That's how we train in here. You need to come from school straight here. And then that was until, it was time to go home. And then I was at home. Powerlifting became my number one priority because it took me from the kid that was getting the shit kicked out of him, that was getting in trouble all the time, to the kid nobody wanted to fuck with, that was actually now destroying people in wrestling and killing people in football. Football was something that I never really enjoyed. I did it because my dad wanted me to do it, and he put me in it from a really young age. My work ethic was high. I never backed off anything because nobody was going to outwork me. Some of that comes from my dad, some of that comes from the wrestling, some of that comes from the guy telling me if you work hard, you'll, so it all comes from multiple different factors from that.
You're doing so well, in all of these athletic things, football, wrestling, powerlifting. Academically, though, still struggling quite a bit.
Terribly.
Through all of this. What was it? Because you did go on to actually get you graduate, you have a college degree.
Yes.
What changed in you that made that possible?
Through high school, it was easy, all right, because I was still tracked LD. Everybody else may be taking biology. I was taking rock science. Here's 12 rocks. Learn their names. English, I didn't take really any English courses. It was like writing. So you just sit and write something. Then actually one of the courses was reading. So I would just read Powerlifting USA. So
but literally they just wanted you to read. That was the course.
Yes,
just sit there and read.
So it was just kind of sliding through. And so that made it easy because, and I was not an A student. I was still, to me, a D student, I could still play. The head coach changed between my junior and senior year, but the coach that came in didn't put up with that shit. So he knew where I was tracked, but he made me take Algebra 2, which he taught, which I didn't even know what the hell algebra was. And part of the deal was, I had to take his class, and then I had to report to the football office 3 times a week to be able to take that. And then I got an A in that course. So there was a little bit there triggered that, I can do this. But so I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life except powerlift, because that was still the first priority. And my senior year, I arranged it so the first 5 periods of every day I was in the weight room. And I wasn't even training. I was just showing other people how to lift weights because it gave me a way to not have to sit in study hall and be bored. And they knew if I did have a study hall, I was going to skip it. So I spent that time showing people how to lift weights there. And I'm like, well, this is kind of cool, showing people how to lift weights. That experience with that coach forcing me to do that kind of laid a little tiny foundation, but it was enough that I knew if I get into a school, I can probably find a way to make it work if I pick the right level courses to be able to do it. My grade point was like 1.59, which it wasn't even enough to graduate. What they ended up doing was taking some of those times in the weight room for the whole year and then found a way to give me credit for, some like coaching or work study or something like that to be able to get it up to like enough to be able to graduate. Okay. So that made it hard. I couldn't get into anywhere. I couldn't get in any public school. It was just denial. But Tiffin took me because it was a newer school. It was a business-only school. And
what do you mean by that? You mean like if you went there, your purpose was to start a business, be in business management? What is the business?
I still really didn't care. I just knew I had to be in college. Through high school, I did work as a fitness instructor in a club, but I also worked my summers in factories. It's kind of a little bit of a factory town, and I knew I didn't want to do that. It sucked, but that's kind of what everybody did. And that's kind of how I was tracked, and the friends that I hung out with, that's what their goal was, but I didn't want to do that. So Tiffin was just the only place I could really go, and I went there, but the caveat there is I had to take courses that I did not take in high school. I had to take English. I had to take algebra. I had to take biology. I had to take, and then once I got through those, there was a communication course, an accounting course, a finance course, marketing course. And so just basic level 1 business coursework. So, and it was a smaller school. I went through there, I ended up getting A's and B's, and I'm like, I can do this. Actually, I really can do this. They were good teachers, especially the ones dealing with the algebra and the English and all that kind of stuff, because we were all kind of the same boat, either slid by because of sports or slid by for whatever reason. And now we got to try to fix them or they're never going to make it through.
Wow.
So they cared and helped and made a big difference. And then I'm like, I could get the fuck out of here, because I don't know what I want to do, but the gym here sucks. It was a YMCA, and I did bodybuilding at the time because there were no powerlifters. I couldn't powerlift, and it was just like this.
Was that a big switch for you? It seems like a big switch in terms of like.
Yeah, it was, but I didn't have a choice. I love lifting weights, and it's like, well, fuck, if I don't have anybody to spot, what am I going to do?
Okay.
Or if they don't have the equipment, I can't do it. And it's not like you need a whole lot of equipment. So it's just what I did. But then it's like, okay, I'm going to go to Bowling Green State University. And I went there, and it's like, okay, now they have a powerlifting gym, but this is like some kind of recreational bullshit. So I found a gym in Toledo that had, powerlifters there and was training there, and flunked out my first semester. I was not used to 300 students and one teacher that you can barely understand. And so after I flunked out, I came back, and I think my grade point at that point in time was like a 0.75. You had to sit out a semester, so I had to come back home, which I did not want to do. Because when I left home, to go to college the first time, and I transferred over the summer, my goal was to never go back home again. So I had to go back home and spend three months there with the hope of getting back into summer school. And I went to the high school, to the weight room, to be able to just catch up with the coaches that, I knew that helped me. And the wrestling coach that I had that never really pushed for me to continue wrestling, I ran into him in the parking lot, and we were having a conversation. And one thing I found when I was at BGSU was something called a library, which, I never really went into before. And while I was there, I found, the Soviet Sport Strength Review. I found the International Journal of Sport Nutrition. I found textbooks on strength and conditioning. I found textbooks on, motor control. I found textbooks on, anything related to strength. And I would sit there all fucking day. Angel Spazoff came to the United States many, many years ago for a tour. And it was documented in one of the NSCA journals, and it's spread over like 4 or 5 journals. And it was how the Bulgarians trained. And it was intriguing. So I'm looking into that. Then I'm looking at why, why these methods? Why are they doing this?
You're actively studying. You knew how to study. You were
so
doing
I'm trying
it.
to figure that, like, how is this going to work with powerlifting? And then when I went back and I'm in the parking lot with this coach, I remember him saying, how's school going? I'm like, it's fine, And I said, but listen to this. And I started going into this Bulgarian shit. And I'm like, I think if we do this, and instead of actually using a max, we come up with some type of perceived max, so we don't have to max out all the time. And then we work up and figure out what that max could be, but then base the percentage off of that, and then work. And so this is going on for like 20 minutes. And he just stops me and he says, Dave, listen to me. How are you doing in school? Because he already knew. I didn't know he already knew. And I saw I flunked out. I said, I think I'll get a job, but, if we can find some place that's got these power racks, and I'm kind of back on all this kind of stuff. And he stops me again. He said, Dave, listen to me. You are not stupid. And he had to say it a few times before he got my attention, because I kept, they say that I'm going to look away. Right. And he caught my eye and he said, you are not stupid. You're just fucking lazy. And it stunned me. It's like, and that was kind of like the end of the conversation. It's like, I don't remember anything after that. He could have turned around and walked away, or we could have talked for another hour. I don't remember a thing. I just remember driving home and having to pull over and crying in the median because I didn't fucking know now. Was I stupid or was I just being lazy? I got to go back. So I drove home and I told my mom, look, I still can get my job as a bouncer. I can still get my job managing the gym I was at. I'm going back. And she said, but you can't take any classes. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to work there, pull more hours. Then when I went back with that question in mind. Am I stupid or am I lazy? And then it's like, okay, now I know my limitations. I'm not going to take more than 2 or 3 courses at a time. So I would sign up for 6 courses and I would drop the 3 that I thought were hard.
Okay.
I picked the courses by walking the shelves of the university bookstore. So no more syllabus, no more counselor, none of this. I just walked the shelves and found books that I thought were cool. And then I took those classes.
So you weren't in like a program necessarily.
Not
you
at
were
this
just
point.
taking. Okay.
Yeah, when I went in, it was business. Like my parents wanted business. Everybody was pushing me for business. So that's kind of where the direction was. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to fucking power lift. I'm looking at things like, well, the psychology would be cool because then I can learn how to use my mind better when I'm training, and the communication is cool because if I am working as a trainer or a coach, at some point in time, I have to learn how to be able to communicate with that. So I'm picking all these courses based upon what I really thought I wanted to do in the future was still power lift, but at some point in time, I want to be able to show people how to lift weights, but there was no avenue to be able to do that. After five years now of taking courses with no real purpose in mind, except don't fail it. And keep in mind, the whole time I am still helping to manage a gym or managing a gym. So at the very least, I'm thinking I can manage a health club or I can run a gym, do something along those lines. But all I need to do is graduate college. And after 5 years, I remember I started asking around, like, how many credit hours does it take to graduate? I don't even know how many I have. So I had to go to the administrator office and have everything printed out. And then we went to every college on campus and got their little, guide to what you had to take to graduate, and spent 3 hours just checking off different boxes on all these different, schools.
So you had like portions of all these
to
majors
figure out like,
completed?
I might be graduated now, So
yeah.
we're like checking everything off. And I was one course away from graduating with a sociology degree. And I'm like, well, this is fucking interesting because I really don't know what you could even do with that. But all I really wanted to do was graduate. But obviously that's where my interests were. The only problem was I had to take a foreign language. And I tried 4 times before then. It's like 3 classes in one to me. You got to learn how to spell it, speak it, and conjugate it. It's like if it was just on spelling the words, I could probably pass it. If there were 3 different courses over a period of time, I could probably do it. I could not do it. And that's not a lazy thing. I tried, and I think I tried 4 times and dropped before before the end date. And I'm like, there was no other option. That was it. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm transferring out of here. My grade point now is high enough because I never retook the courses I failed. All right. I was too scared to do that because that would fuck my GPA up. I knew I needed a 2.3 or 2.5 or whatever to graduate. I transferred to the University of Toledo, met with the guidance counselors, and they're, what do you want to do? I'm like, I really don't know, but I love fucking powerlifting, and that's all I do. So it's what I'm the best at, and I want to be around it in some way, some capacity, the rest of all my life. And she said, well, what do you think you would need to be the best power lifter if you were to try to teach that skill to somebody? I said, I need, exercise physiology, I need kinesiology, I need biomechanics, I need psychology, I need communication skills, I need coaching skills. So I'm just rambling off all this stuff. I need nutrition, I need nutritional biochemistry, I need to know how it works in the body. I need all these different things. And she said, okay, we're going to create independent studies based upon exercise science and nutrition. Laid it out, says it's going to take you 2 years, to be able to finish these courses. But I really think you should go to Owens Tech, which is like a small tech school, and retake these 2 courses. And I'm like, man, if I do that and I fail them, you're not going to let me back in here. And she said, if you don't do them, you're going to think you're a failure the rest of your life, so it's not going to matter if you come back in here or not.
Wow.
All right, so, I'm going to do this, but I'm only going to take one at a time. And I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting in the microeconomics class. The teacher was doing such a good job of explaining. It's not that hard. And so I aced that. I'm like, holy, this is simple. Like,
wow.
Why did this disrupt my entire educational career? But then I always think, when I think stuff like that, I always think on the other end of the scale. How did this change the trajectory of my life? Because look where now I'm actually going to study what everybody told me I could never make money doing. Like, oh, you can't do that exercise shit. You can't make money doing that. You'll never make a career. You need to do the business. You need to do the business. And now I kind of put myself in a position where I had to do this. It's the only way I was going to be able to graduate. And I aced the other one. So went back to the guidance counselor, and she said, I told you. And I'm like, wow, how did you know? And this was the first time I ever had a guidance counselor that gave a shit.
Wow.
I'm like, well, how did you know that? She said, Dave, they're not that hard of classes. They really aren't. I'm like, well, why didn't you have me take them here? Smaller class size, more individual attention,
Wow.
and so forth. And then from there, I went on to graduate with a 3.8. Because it took me 5 times as long as it would take anybody else. But, I got through it and I did it.
And how long were you in school?
7 years.
7 years.
7 years for a bachelor's degree. But it was also 7 years to learn, how to overcome adversity in life, 7 years to figure out how to pivot. 7 years of experience learning how to run a gym, 7 years of knowing when you're in something too long, that type of thing.
Yeah. We'll get back to my conversation with Dave Tate in a moment. Coming up, we talk about how his life and work changed to fit the needs of his family. Stay tuned. I want to take a moment to thank those of you who are listening to this show, even if this is your first time. I'm grateful for each person who chooses to listen when there's an infinite amount of podcasts to choose from. Thank you. I'm honored and would love if you shared your favorite thing from this podcast with me directly. You can share via a DM on Instagram at Rogue Ones Podcast, or just using the form submission at rogueonespodcast.com. Thanks again, friend. Now, let's get back to this conversation with Dave Tate. We'll transition to his post-college life with the founding of EliteFTS, starting with meeting Louis Simmons, the founder of the infamous powerlifting club, Westside Barbell.
I've known Louis Simmons since I was my first meet. He would give advice in warm-up rooms, and it's like, hey, tuck your elbows. It's just Louis being Louis. But I caught his attention when I was doing a couple meets during that period of time in Toledo, where he started saying, look, you need to come down and start training with us on the weekend. And so I started making trips from Toledo to Columbus to train.
At Westside.
At Westside. And that would have been around 90. And then eventually ended up moving to Columbus for that reason. And my wife's family is from Columbus.
You founded this company, EliteFTS, with your wife. And you've actually, in these Q&As, people ask, if you could tell yourself 20 years ago, what would you tell them? And both times I think you've said, treat your wife better.
That answer will never change. And it's been the same way for maybe 6 or 7 years now. And it will always be the same.
Do you feel like you treated her poorly?
I know I did. Yeah, I know I did. We went through a really rough patch, and a lot of things were exposed, through counseling or through her just flat out telling me that she wanted a divorce, and that, the first 10 years of her marriage were terrible. I still have to live with that. Okay, so I can do all I in my power to try to make up for it, but you can't replace 10 years. I can't change the 10 years. I can't. I can't change the things that I did. And I was never physically abusive, but they're most definitely, thinking back, I was mentally abusive. I certainly was not present, because powerlifting was my number one priority. My son was born, I slept downstairs. I didn't want the baby waking me up. I needed my sleep to be able to train, and so, after X amount of years, and even her telling me during that time frame, she really didn't know walking down the aisle if it was the right decision. Fortunately, we made it through that, and our relationship is probably better than it would have been had none of that happened. So, it's 5 times better than it was, but I'm not going to sit there and say that those 10 years were great because it's 5 times better now. Had I not been like that, had I not been so fucking selfish about everything, and was more present and inclusive and so forth, then I may have done better in the sport, because I would have had more support. I would have had support from my biggest fan. I don't regret the training. I don't regret the injuries. I don't regret the fact that it took longer to get through school, or slower to grow a business, or any of those other things associated with when you're all in. I don't regret all those other things, but that I do.
You do.
I do, and I always will.
And you have such a high respect for your wife. Where did you two meet?
In Bowling Green, and it was my roommate at the time was a national level bodybuilder. His girlfriend knew Tracy. So for some odd reason, I was training at the university weight room, which was 4 lifters. It wasn't the rec center. It was like 4 lifters. But to me, it was still, they weren't serious enough for me, which is why I was going to Toledo. But for some reason, if it was snow or whatever it was, we weren't able to make it to where we would normally go. So we trained there, and introductions were kind of made. But one of the funny stories with that was the pull down machine. I used to use all the weights on the stack, and then I would start like finding ways to hang 45-pound plates off the side of the stacks because it wasn't enough weight. And I would wear one of those handkerchiefs, like a do-rag, over my head and tuck it through the back. This is this is going way back, like complete 80s bodybuilding shit. Baggy pants with stupid, pattern prints.
American flag pants, I hope.
I never wore the flags. I always wore the other stupid ones, though, because I'm like, the flags are dumb, but cheetah pattern, that's cool, So, and so I'm wearing this stupid shit with a boat neck sweatshirt because it's just kind of what you did.
Wow.
And I'm pulling on these pull downs, and she's in the back with Raquel was her name, watching as we're training, and the fucking cable breaks, and I end up rolling over backwards off of the lat machine. So that was our introduction. Like, after I break this, Vinny was like, "Hey, man, you got to come over here. You got to meet her." And so then, and I'm thinking, this is awesome. She knows I'm strong as fuck. I just broke the machine,
Okay.
Every girl's going to be impressed with this. The do-rags had to help too.
And my cheetah pants.
Yeah. So he set up a double date thing where we went to a movie, which I can't remember what it was. It was some Bill Murray thing. That was it. I didn't. We just started dating from there, and I didn't have a whole lot of time, because of training and the bouncing and all the other kind of stuff, but that's how we met, was from
And then
that.
you founded Elite.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? What precipitated that?
A series of events. So when I was at Westside, after I got to Columbus, I ended up landing a job as a personal trainer in a corporate fitness facility. Mm-hmm. They were known for their dining, and then upstairs had a full squash courts and weight room and so forth. So I was hired to work there and spent 8 years working there. And while I was working there, I built my clientele up to the point where I was training clients from 5 in the morning till 10 at night. And the only time I didn't train clients is between 8 a.m. and 11:30 when I would leave to go train at Westside. And then I would come back and then train the clients the rest of the time. I always say it doesn't matter what job you have, there's always going to be a certain percentage of that job that you just don't like. Yeah. A lot of people are lucky if they have 10% of the job that they really, really love. If they have that, to keep it, because you could end up in a job that it's 100% that you don't like.
Yeah.
So when I was with Louie, he mentored me, as well as being part of Westside, which was an experience in itself that spanned 14 years. I was helping him with seminars he was doing. I was helping him with consultations he was doing. Coaches were coming into town every weekend. So a lot of the times I'd hang around, just to listen. Louie had coaches in there from the NFL. I think every NFL team over the period of the 14 years I was there, almost every single one of them visited.
Wow.
Or we went, one or the other. And it got to a point where he just kind of got tired of doing it. And I started doing the seminars for him and the consultations for him. And then that branched out to, he really didn't want anything to do with that. It's just, you just go ahead and do it. So that's where this entity started. At the same time, Tracy wanted to start trying to do personal training like in home. So she set up the business entity for that, and it never really did anything. And she trained at Westside for a few years as well. One night she was in the gym complaining about her job. And Louie asked her, why don't you just take over all the crap that I sell? And it wasn't a lot of product. It wasn't a lot of inventory. I'd say it may be $3,000 total. But during this time period, it was, my first son was born. And I rarely saw my dad because he worked all the time. And if it was, we need to go on vacation, well, we can't do that. The store's open Saturday and Sunday, so even weekend stuff. And he always made it to my football games, but, anything else, he was never there. It was retail, so he had to be there. and he was in the same position that a lot of other people are. He had one sales guy, and that was really it. So if he wasn't there, it had to be him. So I didn't want to be that.
And so far in the timeline, you're at Westside from 8 to 11, you said.
Yeah.
And your wife is there at night.
Yes.
And then in the middle, you're training them. Did you see each other at all? When did you
when I got
get to
home,
see each other? Yeah.
like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night.
But then you throw your son into the mix, and then...
And I realized I'm never going to see my kid. I was completely full, with my hours. All these kind of things were all coming together at the same time. And then the consulting started to expand a little bit more. And I had a really good relationship with the manager of the overall club, not just the health club, but the overall club. And spoke to him and told him that I wanted to move my position to an independent contractor. And I told him of the consulting, and I told him of that. And I said, the only way I'm going to be able to actually build this and be able to get to a position to where I'm not going to be working all day in the same place. Like, the hours don't bother me. I still work a lot of hours now. The location does. Like when it's 80 hours in the same location, that's a problem. If it was, some hours at home, some hours at Barnes and Noble or whatever, where I still work, the same number of hours. He appreciated that, but he also became a mentor because of that. So then when I had, free time and I didn't have anything to do, we just sat and talked business. It's like, well, what would you do? And then he pulled in some of my best clients. And for a couple hours, we just sat around a table and we just started brainstorming things like, what do you really want to do? Like, I want to help people become stronger. Well, how many people? Well, as many as I can. Well, do you understand that's limited? Like, you do that here, but it's limited to the 80 clients, 100 clients that you have here. If you had your own facility, it's going to be limited to that. Is there a way that you can do this in a more broad sense? And I'm like, well, I am answering a lot of questions, online, through this deepsquatter.com site. So maybe something...
Is that the first place that you kind of were online?
Yeah. When I first got a computer, the first thing you're searching is this. And I saw there's a Q&A about Westside Barbell. And a lot of the answers they weren't correct. They weren't totally wrong, but they also weren't what we were doing. So I reached out to the guy and said, do you need a little help here? Because I am in the club. I've been here for a long time. I know exactly what we do. I actually give seminars on it. I ended up doing a seminar from that, a question that somebody saw on that page that called, and I went to do the seminar, and it was in South Carolina. And driving to dinner after the seminar, somebody in the back seat had said, have you ever thought about having a website? And I said, well, I kind of have one now. He's like, well, no, you don't. What you have is called a banner site. It's like it's a page and it's got a list of your products. I said, that's not a
banner
website.
site, is that what they called them instead of a landing page?
Yeah,
now
it was just a banner. Yeah, it was just a banner site. It's just very, very simple. Nothing clickable. It's just there it is. And I'm like, yeah, I can't really afford anything. So I got a buddy that's working on something right now, and it ended up being like a forum, but it wasn't a forum, it was a Q&A. And I'm like, well, yeah, fuck. I mean, if I'm going to be a beta test thing, it's not going to cost me anything. I'll be more willing to do that. Yeah. So the site started as a Q&A. Okay. So when people see all the Instagram AMAs and like, oh man, this is amazing, I can't believe you're doing that. It's like, you guys, you don't know the history here, man. I've been answering 500 to 1,000 questions per month since 1998. Jeez. It's just the median changes. And there were a couple years where there wasn't one, where when we moved to the new site, we had a Q&A on there and it just didn't pop because social media. Yeah. Social media took that aspect away, and it just now with this AMA on Instagram kind of brought it back. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Now I got this back. I can do this again and be able to fill that and put that back in there. But it's been going on since forever. And then people through those, through that Q&A starts asking, well, where do I get these bands? Where do I get these books? And
you're already selling Louis' stuff, right? The few
almost,
things he had?
almost. Okay. I mean, we were considering it.
Okay.
All right, but now all of a sudden it's all coming together. It's like, no, wait a minute. Louis just asked my wife, about these, and these, and people are asking about these, and these. And they're like, well, can you add a store to this? I don't know. I got to ask the guy that's doing the website for me for free if he can build a store for free. And he's like, yeah, what the hell? So it all started from Q&As, out of just wanting to help people become stronger.
If you've been tracking with us, you know Dave's timeline. Grew up bullied and confused, found the gym, and it all changed. He finishes college, trains in the most epic powerlifting club of all time, becomes a household name, if your household is into any sort of strength sport like mine is, and then starts his company, founded on the principle of giving away information for completely free. I wanted to hear more about why and how. Why did he feel a deep-seated need to be so open with this information he worked so hard to obtain? Why was his experience in high school sports teams so fundamental to his philosophy all these years later? How does his business sustain this kind of model? How did his childhood experience impact the way he fathers his children? And finally, how can we aim for living a fruitful and remarkable life? And that's been something that you've been passionate about, and that's I think probably one of the main things that anyone would take away from you if they spend any amount of time watching your stuff, listening to your talks. You have this attitude of, I think you call it benevolence in one of your chapters, going back to those guys in the gym, right, that poured into you and answered your questions. What else contributed to this? I mean, I think you gave a talk just this weekend because my husband was at your summit about giving for no reason at all, giving without anything in coming back to you. How does that play into what you're doing now?
If I want to be 100% forthright, I mean, we just came off of Easter, right? Somebody gave for me the ultimate sacrifice, right? So if you want to talk about giving back, I'm already forgiven for any sin, that I would create. And that's expecting nothing in return. And
did you grow up in a faith-based household?
I grew up under so it was Methodist for a while, and then it was Baptist for a while, and then it was like nothing for a while. And it wasn't until, I got older and really started to get hit with hard adversity that I started wondering, like, what's the real thing going on here? What's the big picture? Faith it's a big part of my life, and it's a weird thing because online you got to be careful about how you say that because you're going to end up being slammed. But even regardless of whatever somebody feels their religious base is, if it's even none at all, faith is still faith. Faith is still believing in something that you don't know is real, right? So you have to have that to survive in life, because how else are you going to get through adversity? I mean, shit gets hard sometimes. So I've never, ever thought that, and it can be hard. I've never thought through the hardest times that, this is it. It's always like, what? It sucks and it's hard, but at some point in time, it's going to be okay. Not everything happens for a reason. I can't justify that, because I don't even know if I believe that. All right. But things are going to be okay. It may take time. That helps you get through, some of the darkest times. It helps you get through darker times than you got through before, because you never know what the future is going to bring. Part of the whole live, learn, pass on thing I talk about is with the live part, you can't predict the future, but you can prepare for it. And you can't change the past, but you can learn from it. But you can live in the present, which you should pay attention to. All those people, from those guys in the gym that my dad dropped me off at the first time to the coaches I gave the examples of, they helped me tremendously with technique and powerlifting and so forth. And then there's Louis Simmons, and then, there's Buddy Morris, and then I just keep going down the line. There's all these people that helped me, with training. And then there's a list of people that kind of helped me with business. It's just advice and so forth, that they never charged me anything. So I kind of feel I owe it to them to be able to pass on, to other people. Part of the reason why EliteFTS does what it does, and what I've always done, is to be able to put education out there for free. We have over 1 million pages that's gone out for 20 years. And that's all been supported by producing the highest quality equipment and products that we can, that we use to bring to market to help coaches and athletes become better. And at the same time, the better that does, and the more of our products go out into the market, the more that our brand is seen, if they're using our brand logo instead of theirs, and the more revenue it can generate that allows us to put out more free content.
More free content.
So it's not just buying a power rack or buying a pair of knee wraps. What it's actually doing is helping us to keep putting out more education. The people that have learned from EliteFTS for the past 10, 15, 20 years, by them purchasing and supporting the stuff that we put out, is allowing the newer coaches to have the same opportunity that they had, to have access to the best, most current information, so they can become, the same thing that they have. It doesn't have to be a huge, big moment. It can be one coach walking in the dark that sees a kid running the stairs in the darkness that just says, why are you doing this? And the kid says, because I don't want to be beat again, and then follows up with, if you keep doing this, you'll never get beat. One question, one answer, that you put out there can be the answer that changes the trajectory. It may not change their life, but if you change the trajectory just a notch, it ends up being a completely different outcome. That's why I do what I do, and it's always been that way. Somebody was to dig deep to try to figure out why, I don't know.
Well, imagine if you had come into it in all the other areas of your life, you didn't feel like you felt isolated and alone. And imagine if you had also come into this activity and weren't met with open arms, and
I'd be in jail. I either would have killed myself or been in jail. I mean, at the point in my life at that time, it would have been one of those two things. I'm 100% certain on that. It wouldn't have been stumbling through being in a factory. There's no doubt in my mind, so that's just being present, and I think that's why we're put here, to help other people. I don't see any other reason why we're put on this earth. Are we put here to kill each other? I hope not. So if we're not here to kill each other, are we here to be selfish? I really don't think that would be it either.
So I want to talk about Dave Tate as a dad, because you mentioned your son was born. Both of your sons are adopted?
Yes.
And I think I remember the story you said at one point that, was it your first son where the mom said to take care of him as you're carrying him out of the hospital? How did it change once you became a dad?
Well, it changed everything. That moment was just right there. That was a defining moment for me, because it was, going back to the whole giving standpoint, you got some people that won't loan somebody a quarter to make a phone call. And I think that's what I wrote in the book. And this lady knew she couldn't take care of this child and gives away a life. It hit me hard, and that's why I went back. And all of a sudden I'm looking at my work schedule and I'm like, this I can't fulfill this promise doing this. This isn't going to work. I have to find a way to change this. Like, okay, I know I want to be able to see my son. I want to see him step, I want to see him crawl, I want to see him walk, I want to see all these things that for the first time that I know for a fact most parents miss, but babysitters see. It's like, I don't want that to be the case. How can I make this happen to where I can work from home And then if I miss it, it's just because I was answering an email and it's like, oh shit, I can live with that because at least I'll see the second one. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm going to come home and have a babysitter say, hey, Blaine made his first step today. Be like, that's not filling that promise, and it's not just that promise. It was how I wanted to be as a father, because my father, while he loved me tremendously, he gave me great advice, and I mean, he didn't beat me. He just wasn't present. I wanted to be one that's present, so I'm still home when they get off the bus. When he gets off the bus, I'm still home. And my oldest has autism, so he may come home and then go down and take a nap for an hour and then come back up and work on his computer and do whatever he does for an hour. And then we'll have dinner, whatever it is. And he is verbal, but he just won't say anything. That's fine. I got my laptop. I'm just doing whatever. I'm just doing my work. But maybe on that third or fourth day, it happens every week, maybe every couple of weeks. He comes in, he sits down on the couch. He's like, man, you know what happened today? Now what if I wasn't there? If I get home later, he's not going to say, hey, guess what happened today? So that's the benefit of being present, going back to the importance of that.
And we are actually talking in April, the very tail end of April, which is Autism Awareness Month. And you've been so open this month about your son and how just all of the ways that it's kind of brought new ways of looking at things in your own life. Do you see any sort of parallels between the way that your childhood was with feeling isolated, difficulty in school, and how has that influenced the way that you've raised your son?
It was bad at the beginning. It was really bad. As we were going through early intervention, working in the school systems was very hard for me. Tracy helped me a lot during this time because I was having a hard time separating myself from him. It's like, I know this shit and it's not going to happen to him, but it led to a lot of anger, and it led to a lot of quick conclusions. The biggest being, I know he is not going to be labeled autistic. I know what it's like to be labeled learning disabled. He is not going, fighting that hard, until finally, one of the teachers or psychologists, somebody finally kind of got through and said, if you don't embrace this, basically said, this isn't like when you were young. If you don't embrace this, you will not get the help that you need. He will not have an individual education program. He won't have an IEP. He needs that IEP. And I can't disagree with that. I don't know how he thinks. And that's part of, autistic kids.
One of these videos was talking about, he has a trainer that works with him. And you were talking about squatting. And you love squatting. You thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I don't know if you said you couldn't figure out why he didn't like it or something, but eventually it kind of clicked that when he sees, and certainly the people that you have squatting in this facility are squatting a lot of weight. He's not around some hobbyist, guys in a random gym. He's seeing guys that are bleeding from the forehead because they are squatting so much weight. And to him that translates as, pain. I don't want to do that. Right. And so I'm sure that is just like, throughout his life, you've noticed these things that suddenly there's just a massive difference in the way in which you're looking at the same thing.
And he sees things obviously differently. And because he's adopted, I guess it kind of throws another little ring in there because, genetically you can kind of think, parents kind of think a little bit alike, so that's why you'll hear, you'll at some point in time, you'll start saying the same things that your mom said and you don't really know why. It's just kind of that little connection that's in there. Where I don't have that, and it's kind of a good thing because it's a constant process of discovery and trying to figure out what he really needs, what he really wants, and so forth. And that's no different than with my other son from that standpoint. But from the training issue, my fear with both of them is Blaine needed it because there's sensory processing disorder. So there's communication or coordination, balance, things like that needed to be developed and have been developed. So it helped at an early age. but it had to be fun. And, I wasn't able to make it fun because I'm dad. So even though I'm trying to make it fun, it's really not. Even if I brought him in by himself, it really wasn't. He just wanted to play his video game. For me, training changed my life, completely changed my life. It may not change their life, but I want it to be something that is an opportunity that they can use to be able to cope with stress. If they ever get into compromised health, we'll be able to use it to be able to increase their health. I want it to be a tool that they don't hate. So I will never force that on them. And there's the other part of me of it's what I know best. So the greatest gift I can really give them outside of love is to be able to teach them how to train. So I don't want to blow that. So if it takes till they're 21 and they're like, man, I really want to learn how to work out. I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'll wait for that. I'd rather wait for that than try to force them as a 15 or 16-year-old to try to come in to get strong just so they can, be the baddest person in school. I don't want them to have to train under the same pretenses that I've had to train under, and fortunately they haven't had to grow up with those same type of circumstances, but everybody grows up with their own circumstances. It's just, as a parent, do you understand what your kid's circumstances are or not? And I don't know. I don't know if that's a question any parent can ever answer.
One of the things we talk about on this podcast is remarkable living and fruitful living, not necessarily success, but fruitful, remarkable lives. And that's something that certainly you've had. What is the number one thing you would say to someone who is looking at the life ahead of them and thinking, I want to be able to look back and see a very fruitful and remarkable life?
Find a good partner to walk the road with. That would be the best advice I can say. There's in sickness and health, and, all these things change. Money changes. It can come in, it can go away. Health changes. It can get bad, it can go away. Looks change. It can be great, you can get, ugly. Physiques change. It can be good, it can get ugly. If you got the right person that you're walking down the path with, all those things, they don't matter. You have somebody that cares. So if you can find that one person, that can care unconditionally to be able to walk that road with you, you really don't need anything else.
That's great. You can find Dave on Instagram at Under the Bar, and I do suggest picking up his books. They're called Under the Bar and Raising the Bar. You can find links to these along with all episodes past and present at rogueonespodcast.com. Thanks to the team at EliteFTS for allowing me to come to the gym and record this special episode. And thanks to Ryan at Sick Island Studios, as always, for mixing and mastering what you heard today. And if you're still listening, I have a special treat for you. If you know me at all, you know that dog sled racing could be considered my favorite sport, and the Iditarod is like the Super Bowl of this sport. Lance Mackey, 4-time Iditarod champion, came on this podcast last year, and it turns out Dave listened to that episode. Who'd have known he's also an Iditarod fan? And we geek out for a while when he tells me this. Please enjoy.
I still want to sit and ask you about Mackie so bad because it's just fucking whacked. But
what? Are you an Iditarod person?
Oh yeah, I used to have Malamutes.
Dave, I didn't know this.
Yeah, I used to have Malamutes.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't race them, obviously.
This interview might just be completely derailed.
What, if you want to talk about Malamutes, I can talk about them because they are the worst dogs in the world to have as pets. My first one was 185 pounds when it was full grown. And I mean, it's just walk and put its head on the table. Anyhow, it's
oh man, we can talk about Mackie. Yeah. We can talk about Mackie. The 2019, I was a wreck this year watching the 2019 race because and he called it his snooze and booze cruise. Mm-hmm. And oh man, I cried when he crossed that finish line. I was bawling.
I haven't followed him, I guess, since 2018, but just his story in general is that's an amazing story.
Amazing story.
Yeah.
Amazing dude. Oh my gosh, I had no idea you were a Iditarod person.
Oh yeah. I was big time into it for a while, And
Jeez.
now I need to get back into it a little bit more because now you can see it.
Yes,
you know what I'm
you
saying?
can.
Where before it was just like refreshing internet browsers to be able to see what's going on.
That live feed, I had it up at all times watching that.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it was great. I'm going next year. I hope.
Well, good luck with that.
Business picks up. I'm going next year.
That's Alaska, so have fun.
Yeah, I'll just have to get a big old coat.
Yeah.